I've always thought that if people reveal themselves in their literature, and it's telling to me then that the plot of every Russian novel seems to be life was pain and cruelty and injustice, and then it got worse, the end. Uh, the Russian people seem to have a preternatural capacity to endure suffering, but no people have an infinite capacity to absorb suffering. Already, Russia has seen the decline of the ruble, defaulting on debt repayments, and likely most of its population either in poverty or being driven below the Russian poverty line, which is already quite a low poverty line. All this for a war that was meant to project a sense of imperial grandeur, but that has instead revealed that the emperor has no clothes. With that in mind, do you have a sense of whether this is fostering restiveness amongst the Russian people, whether there are strains of political power or centers of political power within Russia that are willing or able to take advantage of that disquiet? And has it in any way undermined Putin's ability to maintain his stranglehold on power in Russia and continue to prosecute this war, or indeed even to survive as a regime?
I mean, I think it's a fascinating question, Akash, that can go in many different directions. But I think you hit at the heart of a major point, which is sort of, with Putin's vision of imperial grandeur, of maybe a Soviet Union light, or, at least a revanchist imperial Russia, you have to ask the question of imperial grandeur, but for who? I mean, certainly it's not the wider Russian public, and we've seen a desire of Putin, and his close associates, to enrich themselves on the basis of the state, to actually entrap more assets, to expand out into Europe, to expand their financial tendrils there. And Catherine Belton, the former Financial Times journalist now at the Washington Post, has done really incredible work on this. Her book, Putin's People, is pretty indispensable, and I recommend you check this out for sort of the link between, kind of the tactics and the underlying ideology. But there's just so much black cash within the higher ranks of the Kremlin that has moved out of the country, that has helped enrich sort of the folks at the top. And that's kind of one of the problems here, is that sort of there's a foreign policy that's concentrated around Putin, that's driven by Putin, but whether there's a public mandate there, it's totally unclear. And at this point, the Russian population is really in the dark in terms of a lot of stuff that they can see. The Kremlin has just cracked down so much on independent media, even since the conflict. Those that still sort of remain in the Russian market, like Medusa, have to come out with a basic disclaimer that they're a foreign agent, projecting against the Kremlin. So, this is a society that has really been clamped under the Putin regime, certainly far from what the Obama administration expected over a decade ago with the reset policy. And you just, I think you have to look at what the Kremlin is doing versus what they're communicating back home, and ask the question that you rightly asked, sort of, this imperial grandeur, this revanchist Russia, but for who? The problem is, of course, if you oppose the Kremlin, what outlet do you have? There's no independent media, like we were talking about, to speak of. There's not much left. And, any political parties, as we saw with Navalny's return, have just really been squashed, not just by the Russian system. I mean, the Duma entry, which really doesn't allow for much of an opposition at all to form, but also just with the treatment of opposition figures, the torture, the beatings, the killings. I mean, we have Nemtsov Plaza in D.C. in front of the Russian embassy, named after the assassinated former Russian premier Boris Nemtsov. So you sort of see everywhere the signs of the willingness and the brutality that the Kremlin is willing to dish out to defend this vision of the world. So even if, there's an opposition to speak of, even if there's rumblings or an inkling of opposition, the consequences are so grave and so great for the Russian public. It's just difficult to see it going very far, as we saw in 2012 and as we saw with Navalny in 2021 and as we see now.